Talk Shop resumes with Brett Glass in Studio 255. This week, no city council meeting. Last week, there was a Fifth Thursday. It was a Fifth Thursday city council open house meeting. It was 6 to 7:30 at the Lincoln Community Center, 365 West Grand in Laramie, the West Side Historic District. Attendance was open, and many, probably 40 plus, showed out in terms of attendance. And it was nice, as so many people will come to such an event and don't always have anything to say. This was not the case in this group. At least half, better than half, made their points known. They came in twos, threes, one at a time. And this was one of the speakers, resident of West Side, Nate Martin.
Business community wanted to save a parking lot, and now you've jumped across the river, across the tracks here, and are angling to put a residential subdivision on the only river that we have. I'd be curious if the city has plans to develop another river, because that's the only one we've got. And if you destroy it, the riparian corridors, as the young lady described earlier, it doesn't come back. I'd be curious where this idea came from that the people of West Laramie just desperately want a residential subdivision instead of an industrial corridor. I don't remember being asked that. In fact, I was at the zoning change meeting where unanimously the residents of West Laramie spoke against the zoning change. Wildlife, which is something that I value as well, tend to live harmoniously among empty structures. It's people they don't like. So if we're trying to protect our wildlife, putting a residential subdivision there is probably the worst thing that you can do. And I also want to push back on this idea of it's just a piece of private land. There's, we just don't know what's coming. I was in a meeting 5 years ago with city planners who were describing to me that this was a priority area for residential development. So this isn't a surprise thing. This isn't it's a private property thing that could go anyway. The city has long had plans to develop this land as residential property, and I think they've been fairly transparent about it. So at this juncture, to come back and say, it could go anyway, this has long been in the works, and I just want everybody to have an honest conversation about the reality of it.
And that was Nate Martin in his comments at the Laramie City Council open house meeting in the Lincoln Community Center, 365 West Grand. Brett, you were in attendance. You also had comments. Any thoughts regarding Mr. Martin's comments before you maybe share a reiteration of your own?
Well, I thought his comments were valid. People were concerned. People are always concerned that the city is operating open loop without being responsive to the citizens. That what it's doing may be claimed to be beneficial to the community, but isn't necessarily it isn't necessarily doing that. People don't necessarily trust the city or feel like it's doing the right thing for them. They also don't feel that it's responsive to them, that it's just going to do what it's going to do after giving citizens a chance to vent, but not actually responding to them. So that was a concern, and that sort of a tone ran throughout the comments at the meeting, unfortunately.
With respect to the council feedback on comments made from the public in general, save two in the community who spoke in support of a yes vote for the blight designation in this particular West Side Historic District adjacent undeveloped land area. What was your observation overall, Brett?
Well, like I said, let's talk about what city council, what these comments were about. City council is poised to designate a big tract of land between the West Side neighborhood and Snowy Range Road as blighted. Sort of like a slum or an area which is otherwise somehow degraded and harmful to the safety and morals or other things in the community and needs to be dealt with as a nuisance.
And let's stop right there.
Yeah.
I love the way you're going. You've done it multiple times, but this city council nor our Wyoming legislature like the letter of the law.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just plain put it out there. Wyoming 1610-105 subsection E says that any funding of a utility adopted in a municipality must go to the electorate. And I sounded out because apparently when you read it in black and white, it must be conveyed differently.
Yeah, well, that's just it. The letter of law in this case says that before the city council can declare an area of as blighted and therefore subject to urban renewal, and by the way, it isn't urban and it doesn't need to be renewed, it's just vacant land, it has to meet certain criteria. And if you go through the criteria in the law, it doesn't seem to meet any of them. It's not really what an urban renewal agency or urban renewal projects are for. It's just vacant land, which hasn't been used for much, if anything, over time. It's near the river. It's a wildlife corridor, which means that there are reasons to preserve it the way it is, and yet city council is trying to sort of shoehorn it. Break the law and shoehorn it into this designation as being blighted and therefore subject to urban renewal.
What you say there is a team effort also. They're going back in and they're a team. It's the Urban Renewal Agency with executive chair of that group selected by city.
Mm-hmm.
Fred Schmeckel,
who sat on city council briefly, but he
in
did not make it past the primary when he ran to keep his seat.
In 2021, he had been appointed as city council member and was involved in area 260 North Pine. I've spoke about this frequently. This was an infill area, undeveloped property that comprised of 3 narrow city platted lots, and they were within the city block of Pine Street, Fremont Street, Cedar Street, and Clark Street. Yeah. As such, at that time, 5 years ago, the city staff recommended approval of a zoning application. It was for an infill zoning change request that was made by Coffee Engineering on behalf of Michael Miller, owner of the property. And that necessitated conversation because the density allowed in that West Side Historic District was, say, for 12 people, and they were small homes and so forth. What they approved was 6 townhomes, 2-bedroom townhomes. And in this case, the infill was going to add impervious area, probably 90% of it at least, and maybe more, but the traffic density was anticipated by city planning to require a paved alleyway. Now, the developer did not want to pave edge to edge on that alleyway between Clark and Fremont in the alleyway of this property at 260 North Pine. Obviously, it's more expensive. Obviously, there's more that you have to contend with when you go edge to edge with pavement, asphalt, whatever. But no drainage accommodations were being added. None were spoke of. None were proactively mentioned. And in spite of being presented to City Council in concern and statements, all the neighborhood within 300 feet were able to do was collectively with due notice, proper notice, eventually were able to sign a petition and require a supermajority, 2/3 vote, in order to pass the zoning request from, I think it was B2 to R3. They wanted dense housing. R2, R3, not similar, not like to the adjacent area, which in August 2025 was designated a historical district. And that historical district is now concerned about the adjacency of this nature area, this industrial 2-zoned area that recently, as recent as November, was voted for on third reading in spite of errors in public notice being issued by the city planning department. This is a characteristic of consistency I can parallel between 2021 and 2025 in city operations. But Nate Martin spoke about, in his statement we just played, was he knew about, from sitting in a meeting, the city's intent to develop this area with multi-unit housing.
Yeah. And, myself personally, I was not entirely opposed to the idea of rezoning the area that they're proposing to declare blighted on the west side as residential. And the reason why is it was previously zoned industrial. And you could put some really big, intrusive, horrible, industry out there, which would be very inconsistent with the west side and would definitely impact it. So going to a more restrictive zoning was not necessarily a bad thing. But this is part of a larger plan. It seems as if long ago the city had, and maybe this is the city staff in conjunction with the new Urban Renewal Agency and with council had the idea they were going to rezone it as residential, call it blighted, subsidize it using urban renewal funds, and have some developer come in and build apartment complexes. And the owner of the land was all for that. The owners, the current owners of the land, 4G Enterprises, are all for that, and here's the reason why. It's a company which wants to liquidate its land assets, and it obviously, when it does so, it wants to get the maximum amount of money for the land.
Seems natural.
Yeah, it's perfectly natural and legal, and it's something you'd expect someone to do. Well, if the land
leverage.
Yeah, but if the land is declared blighted and is part of an urban renewal area, it comes with a tax subsidy. Whoever ultimately buys it is going to pay more because in the long run they're going to pay less in property taxes. This tax subsidy is supposed to encourage development of the land. But here's the problem. If the subsidy is granted before the ultimate developer gets a hold of the land, if it's granted now, while it's not owned by whoever is going to develop it, the benefit winds up going to the current owner because the current owner can then sell it with this increased value attached to it. This is something which I personally have spoken to council about, but it seems as if some members of council don't understand it. And they seem to believe that somehow this benefit will go toward affordable housing. There were a couple of people at the West Side meeting who spoke about the need for the affordable housing, and they're absolutely right. They're absolutely right. We could use more affordable housing in the city of Laramie. But what council didn't understand, and what people were trying to tell them, is that this wasn't a way to achieve it. And this is a problem with unfortunately, with city council. Very often, the public comes to speak to council, and they have the blinders on. They already have their minds made up, and they have their course set.
It sure seems like that observation's accurate in my assessment.
Yeah, and council, once council members are elected to council, they still have to listen to the public. They're elected to represent us. They're not anointed.
One council member has indicated that that's micromanagement, Mr. Glass.
It's not micromanagement. It's making a good policy decision. and they still have to listen. And so far, to my recollection, there is only one council member who on the dais has actually ever said that the public has convinced them to change their mind on an issue. Only one. In recent memory, and that was Brandon Newman when he said that when he announced that he had changed his mind regarding the downtown the downtown parking lot lease that was to a couple of private owners, and the property was then acquired by the Stencil Group.
I can think of one
to
other
the Stencil
example.
Group. Oh, is there another example?
I think of one other
Yeah.
example. It was August 5th, 2025. And on that date, there was surface water utility discussions, and one item was to repeal, and another item was to suspend. And the council were persuaded by former mayor, city councilman Joe Shumway, and his appeal that he had ideas and he would like to be given the opportunity to present those ideas to the public and to council. Now, it may have happened to council, but it did not happen in open forum for the public, to my knowledge, at or about that time, nor during the 120-day suspension of that. Now, I will note that they did sway what I felt like it was the action to vote on utility topic, and they tabled it. So that seemed to be a change in momentum at the time, and I would give city council credit for that.
Yeah, but there are three real simple bedrock principles here. Council should listen to the public, and we should see it changing, people changing their minds. They shouldn't be arguing against what the public says. And one of the things that came out at last Thursday's meeting, unfortunately, was that after members of the public spoke, some of the members of council
took turns
rebutting them instead of listening. And it wasn't as if they were saying anything false. They were, many of them were just voicing opinions. And it seemed inappropriate that the members of council were rebutting them, or that they just plain weren't listening to either the arithmetic or even in a couple of cases quotes of the statute, which they ought to be obeying. So it seems to me that the council in many cases does not listen when it ought to listen.
If yabbits were rabbits, we'd have plenty for Easter.
There, okay, yeah.
So, in all seriousness, there was, you bring up a great principle, listening to the public. What would you score listening to the public in the last year?
Oh, I say it's not very good. Another is, the second.
They called for
principle
public
is,
comment, but it doesn't seem that they want it.
The second principle is that if there is an election called for a city council action, that we give the public an opportunity to vote. There were two recent situations where the city council tried to get around having an election. The first one, just recently, had to do with the renovation of City Hall. The city's project to renovate City Hall and the adjoining the annex to it, which used to be a Carnegie Library and is now part of City Hall, is being renovated, and the project is overrunning its original cost estimate. It's got they need $2 million more in order to do this. And so the city was proposing to borrow money, $2 million, to subsidize this renovation.
So this whole renovation was approved during the 2018 Specific Purpose Excise Tax Initiative. It was a ballot proposition, and they did get their requested approval for that money back in 2018.
Yeah.
And the pace of that SPET initiative being collected to the total of approximately 80 million back then was achieved at a faster pace than they expected. So enter the 2026 specific excise tax balloted item for May 5th coming up.
Yeah. Well, they didn't want to put, they already had enough other things they wanted to spend money on. They didn't want to put that $2 million on the new proposal for the special purpose excise tax. Instead, they wanted to borrow it. And, well, the state constitution, the Wyoming Constitution, says that when a city wants to borrow money, it's supposed to ask the voters if that's okay. And it's no big deal. You know, we're coming up with a special election for that fifth penny tax. There's absolutely no reason why we couldn't also ask on that same ballot, can the city borrow money to fix up City Hall? But no, it didn't do it that way.
They could have asked for 97 million.
Yeah. They might have, although there is a negotiation going on between the city of Laramie, the city of Rock River, and the county over and they have to divide the estimated amount of income that they're going to get, and there's some question as to whether they could get 2 million more.
Let's just go this way. Let's summarize that proposition. May 5th special election ballot initiative. Albany County projects requested 43.7 million. Laramie Regional Airport project, 4 million. City of Laramie projects, 45.5 million. So their request would have went to 47.5 had they been approved in negotiations between Rock River Town Council,
right,
Albany County Commissioners, and the City Council.
So that money would have so Rock River and the County Commission would have had to agree to give up $2 million for them to do it that way. So they decided
they were going to borrow. Is there a limit of 95 million, Brett, on the SPET initiatives? Is that a cap? I wasn't aware of that.
They make an estimate of the total amount of income that's going to come in, and they have to keep during that period, which goes multiple years.
It's like 8 years.
They have to stick to it.
All right.
So anyway, instead of bringing the issue of should the city borrow $2 million to the voters, they tried to weasel around it. What they did was a crazy deal with the bank, which is essentially a loan, and we've talked about this on the air. They lease City Hall, literally, they lease City Hall to a bank, and the bank leases it back to the city. But the rent is such that the city is paying more rent than the bank.
Schedule.
That's right. Well, here's the thing. It's actually a deal in which the bank pays the bank pays them rent for City Hall up front, a big lump sum, which happens to be the $2 million they want, and then they pay rent over time. And the rent that they pay back adds up to more than that.
It's been cleaned.
That's right. It adds up to more than the $2 million, and the amount just happens to be amount of interest they would pay on a loan. So they're calling this a pair of leases, and it really is just a loan. It's really kind of a shady deal. And what they did was get some lawyers over in Cheyenne to draw up some papers that sort of made it look like there were two leases going on. But in the paperwork, if you go through the paperwork, it actually talks about the excess being interest. So it really, deep down, if you even just go through and skim it, you can see that there's an amortization schedule in there that, it's really a loan. And, so the city went to all this trouble and paid these lawyers to try to find some kind of crazy workaround so they didn't have to ask the voters.
Now, they did find a good rate. I will give them credit, 4.125%. Not a bad loan rate.
It's not a bad loan rate, but
it's a loan rate.
Not only that, but, when cities issue municipal bonds, those bonds are tax-free. And so you can you can have the yields on the bonds be quite low, too. And so the city could have gone ahead and borrowed or they could have gotten cities are very reliable borrowers. They could have just gotten the bank loan at the same amount.
Well, and
same bank.
Hold still just one moment, because it just flashes across my memory that the city on December 3rd, 2024, adopted a utility fully within their scope of possibilities. Stormwater utility. Immediately, they bypass the voters, and in item 15, they adopt the utility on December 3rd, 2024. Item 16, they immediately bypass the voters with an initiative to authorize an engineering technician being hired. Now, this 469-day period, as of about 2 weeks ago, from that adopted period before the repeal effort is underway with that ordinance altogether, repealing it, our investment in the city revenue utilization, about 2.4 to 2.7 million. In 469 days, they could have used that 2 point something million, and they had their money for the 2018 SPET project for the remodel, didn't they?
Well, again, they need more because the project is overrun. So
if they had money not approved by the voters December 3rd for that utility purpose and expanding and in having a department be created for this, a separate utility fee endorsed deal, they could have easily used that 2 million, said, you know what, we're going to authorize that for that supplement to that. The project was approved by the voters. We're using it for that.
Yeah.
Onward.
Well, here's the thing about the whole stormwater issue. State law in Title 16, Chapter 10, if you want to get specific about where it is, state law of the Wyoming statutes says that if you're going to establish a stormwater drainage utility, you need to go to the voters and get their approval of the way you finance it. And if it's reasonable, the voters, there's no reason for the voters not to approve that. But no, they went ahead and the city, and by the way, Laramie isn't the only city that did this, claimed that there were some weasel words in another section of the law that let them bypass the requirement to go to the voters. So, again, the city was trying to get around going to the voters, and again, it was violating the very clear directive in state law that said they had to. So here we have, again, problems with going to the voters and problems with trying to bypass what state law says you have to do. I mean, maybe there's some weasel words you could technically interpret as letting you get around that, but that certainly isn't the spirit of the law. They're certainly violating that, and it's a real concern when cities try to do that.
Even more problematic for me, take me back, gosh, I hate this, December 3rd, 2024, Councillor Shumway asks for advice, legal advice from city staff, and that was not provided. On third reading, Bob Southard, city attorney, was not prepared to answer council's question on third reading. Quote unquote, I haven't read that in a while, so I'm not prepared to give that comment at this time.
Well, this has to do with the role of the city attorney. The city attorney is one of the very few city employees who is hired directly by council, not hired by the city manager. And is really supposed to give the city good legal advice, and is supposed to advise them on whether they're following the law or not. Now, unfortunately, there's two ways that two attitudes that that your city attorney can take. One is that the city needs to be held to the law and needs to do what the law says. The second is that whatever the council does is right, and that the city attorney's job is to defend them, right or wrong. And unfortunately, it seems as if our city has taken the latter attitude, that the job of the city attorney is to defend them doing whatever they please, even if they break the law. And that's not a good thing, and I think it's something that the public needs to chime in on, because we really do want our city not to try to break the law, but to try to follow the law. And especially, when the public is going to it and asking for that. So, again, we've got these three principles. The city should be responsive to the public. It should it should allow should allow elections, and it should not try to flout the law. So these are three things which council is not doing, and we're going to have an election this year. We have an opportunity at this point to vote in members of council especially in Ward 1 and 3, which each have two members up, or two seats up for election. And we have an opportunity to vote in people who think that way. And we, as the public, really need to consider doing that, because right now it sure seems as if the city council is being autocratic rather than listening to the public.
Now, with back to the blight conversation in city council open house meeting last Thursday, I give credit. There was one citizen, Lucas Freilich, and Lucas plain and simply said he supported a yes vote for the blight designation. Speak more on that, Brett.
Yes, and he actually referenced me because I had made comments on the other side of the issue. And the fact is, he was speaking from the point of view of a young person who wanted to settle in Laramie and was looking for affordable housing.
He wanted to make this his permanent home.
Yes, was looking for affordable housing. But, and he thought that the blight designation and doing the urban renewal project might help him with that. But, there are a couple of questions here. First of all, would he have been willing to live in an affordable apartment? Because that's most likely what's going to be built on that land.
If it's affordable at all.
Yeah, and second of all, will that apartment really be any more affordable as a result of the blight designation? Again, when you designate an area as blighted, you create an urban renewal area there. There is an immediate tax subsidy that goes to the current owner. And if the current owner sells it, again, the current owner makes more money because they're selling it with that tax subsidy. So by the time the property got into the hands of a developer who is developing it, the subsidy would be gone. And it wouldn't help either the developer of the property or anybody who lived there. Or suppose it was a condo. Suppose they had an opportunity to buy a unit there. It wouldn't help. It wouldn't make that unit any more affordable either. And so, while I said this when I had a second opportunity to comment, while I 100% agreed with Mr. Freilich that yes, we need affordable housing, I was very concerned that council had been misled as to what the blight designation would do, and that it really wouldn't help. Council didn't seem to listen when I pointed this out, and I was kind of concerned about this because, again, it's simple math. Land sells for more when there's a tax break attached to it.
And the owner currently will make more.
That's right.
Potentially on sale.
That's right.
Or in their operation. Say they don't sell. Well, obviously they will have the advantage, and they will actually be able to probably secure financing. The city's financing, based on the backs of whom? You and I.
Yeah, that's right. And, the other thing about the tax credit is that supposedly the developer has to spend that amount developing the land. But when you're starting with vacant land that needs a lot of work to develop because it's on a riverbank, and you're going to be building everything, including the streets, including parking lots, everything like that, you're sure to spend more than the subsidy. So, yes, the subsidy is all going to, and any subsidy which went directly to a developer, it's not, the current landowners don't seem to be the ones who are going to develop it. Who knows? It's going to be totally eaten up by the development costs. There's not necessarily going to be any left to save anybody any money.
The opinions that we express, Brett Glass and myself, Eric Henderson, are those of he and I, and only he and I, with respect to this program. They don't represent that of any of our supporters or in programming and so forth. But this is completely reviewable by you, the listener, you, the viewer. Now, as you do so, you can find this on YouTube. I want to compliment the city of Laramie. They have the owl present, and the owl will voice activate to the speaker, and I appreciate the recording of it because it's entirely archived and available on YouTube. You simply say in Google search, Laramie City Council live stream March 26, 2026, and it will bring up this Lincoln Community Center event in its entirety, about an hour and 28 minutes worth. And as you review it, as I began to do, as I promised in the session, I made point that the community really wasn't being heard when most of the responses from council were not "thank you, we appreciate that perspective." They rebutted. And as they rebutted, it's all taken at this step to 100% of it I've transcribed. I've utilized AI. I'm verifying that AI transcription. Right now, it's word for word, probably 98% accurate. Now, that's pretty reliable. With a few edits, I should be able to time let's just time the dedication of public comment session, this open house, and let's just see what the first data is going to come back is. What was the public's time in favor of the blight? What was the public's time against the blight designation? And what was city council's time for and against? And you'll find city council seems to be trending towards approval of blight, but they do so by reframing the definition of blight. They don't choose to read the letter of the law. They don't choose to read the letter of, no, they have chosen to reinterpret, reframe, and redefine blight.
Yes, and what's more, they also chose to ignore an entire portion of the statute. There's another portion of the Wyoming law which says that before you plan what to do with an urban renewal area, if you start making plans, you initiate the urban renewal project.
You mean they skipped steps?
Well, they got things backward. They're supposed to declare it as being blighted first, and yet there in their packet, when they were considering this blight designation, was a complete document which says right on the front, urban renewal plan, that was paid for, by the way, by the city and not by the landowner, who's going to benefit from this. Urban renewal plan for that area. So they actually hired an expensive consulting company from Cheyenne to draw up an urban renewal plan for the area, and they had a presentation, sort of an open house in West Laramie, presenting that plan to the public before they even designated the area as an urban renewal area. And so, again, they did not follow state statute. They should have followed a proper procedure that that the state legislature has already laid out, but they did not do that.
Now, go ahead.
Another way in which they violated legislative intent, did not follow state law, was that the council is being very open about it. They say that this blight designation is being done for the purpose of creating affordable housing. Now, in 2025, the legislature considered a bill which explicitly allowed an urban renewal fund, agency and fund and area to be used for the purpose of creating affordable housing. And the bill was voted down. It would have explicitly allowed, again, a urban renewal to be used for that purpose. It was voted down. And the reason why was some of the things that we mentioned. Where is the subsidy going to go? Is it really going to help? Is it a good idea to claim that the development of affordable housing on vacant land is some kind of urban renewal when it's really, again, not urban and not renewal? So the legislative intent was clearly not to allow what the city council right now is proposing to do. And again, even though this is right there, you can look it up on the legislative website. Again, they're ignoring that. So, these are two other ways in which the city does not seem to be following the law, but just kind of doing what it wants to do. And even though it may not actually be productive.
Interestingly enough, one of the points that are worth mentioning is that although I witness you time after time reading line for line exact verbiage from statute, from the law, from ordinance, I don't witness that same characteristic and communication style from council. Not overwhelmingly. And I don't, when it's not in favor of their position, I don't often see it in city staff action and recommendations to council. What I've seen blatantly this time is a redefinition by Fred Schmeckel and city manager Todd Fieser, along with his staff, our staff. Remember, council, staff, they're all to be service to the community. And as such, I want to be fair, though, and mention that there was a second speaker that seemed to support a yes vote for the blight designation. Commonly very supportive of council, and I want to be. But when you impact my primary investment, and I'm not alone, it's the home is probably the largest investment that anyone generally will make in their life. A real estate transaction, a home, a roof over your head, that is at a different place. But this second voice in support of the blight designation stated that her opinion was that the definition, she did think it would pass legal scrutiny, right? Now, she didn't identify herself in her testimony at this conference, this open house. However, when she completed her position statement, council followed up and asked her what her opinion was. And her opinion was that of an attorney in the state of Wyoming. And as such, council's rebuttal felt like to me, see, there's an attorney in the room with her opinion stated in favor of what we're doing. So that's what it felt like.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to be a lawyer to read the plain language of the law. I actually had pre-law training. I was myself personally. I was on my way to get to going to law school and changed my mind. I'm an engineer, and I was looking at becoming a patent lawyer. And well, in order to become a good patent lawyer, there's two things that you need. One is training in the actual engineering and science, and then training in the law. And you go and you pass the bar exam, you become a lawyer, and I never went on to do that because I became too fascinated with the development of the technology at the time. This was right when personal computers were becoming possible. I decided to branch off into that. I started designing chips instead. But I did get the basic legal training, including what's called statutory construction, which means how you interpret the law. So, what you learn when you do that is that it's really pretty much common sense how to read the law. Every word counts. You can't ignore things. And if two sections conflict, you have to read it in a way that both of them apply if you can. And that didn't come up in this particular case. But no, you don't have to be a lawyer in order to understand what the law says. And also, the lawyer that commented at the work session at the open house is mainly involved in is actually a good criminal defense attorney, but does not specialize in this area of the law. And so, there's room for differences of opinion. What I would have said is at this point, counsel should seek an independent opinion.
Well,
don't take my word for it. Don't take one lawyer, the opinion of one lawyer who is just kind of speaking off the cuff. Actually seek a real legal opinion from a dispassionate third party. And if the city attorney, again, is out to defend whatever counsel does, then seek the opinion from a lawyer who doesn't have, who basically doesn't have any skin in the game.
After the city heard the attorney, the resident and attorney speak, I took an opportunity to
Yeah.
share my comments. And my comments included a reminder to council that I myself, going into the July 29th, 2025, Fifth Tuesday meeting held at the fire station in West Laramie, I invested in legal opinion, a separate, independent, but paid for by me
Yeah.
attorney. And that law firm indicated that there was a problem, and it was an arguable problem. 1610-105E regarding the surface water utility adopted, there was an argument to be made. I submitted that written letter. I paid my attorney to submit that letter directly to council. Only one of 9 of our elected city officials even chose to respond. And that one, Matt Lockhart, Councilor Lockhart, thanked me for that opinion. It was interesting, though, that at the open house meeting, Councilor Lockhart was the one who asked the public member what their field of expertise was.
Yeah.
And that was something that I mentioned. And then there was an immediate rebuttal that was permitted by the attorney as she was speaking. And I think she had a due right to respond and rebut, which I stood and rebutted the rebuttal, and I was allowed. And then, you know, I mean, I have foregone rebuttal and then rebuttal in previous, go back to November 2025. A very long rebuttal was basically demanded by Brad Enzi in representing the Laramie Chamber Business Alliance, because as he was applicant representative for 4G Enterprises back then, it was disturbing to me that city council, our city dollars, are invested in the Chamber Business Alliance, $10,000 annually through 2025, maybe 26. I think it's a five-year approval following 2022. Annually, $10,000 of our funds being used to lobby against us in part, not remaining neutral in part. And in that, understandably, Mr. Enzi wanted to go up and wanted to remind people that they had only taken to 2022, they had only taken 1.1 million in 10-year period.
Yeah.
And they were now down to one $10,000 investment of our city tax dollars annually. And that was a big improvement that should be noted. It did not change the fact that 1.1 million, $50,000 of you and I's tax money was being utilized to lobby against us, to exist against us. Not to mention 30 years of my career that I have spent supporting Jingle Bell Jaunt, Hometown Holiday Hurrah, city event after event that build the interests of, yes, you guessed it, the Chamber of Commerce, our Laramie Chamber Business Alliance. I am an advocate today for their general mission. I absolutely am. And I'm not opposed in most cases to development. But go back to November, another rule that City Council chose to ignore, actually they acknowledged City Planning Department issued an error of public hearing to be held on a date that didn't even exist in all of 2025. And this was regarding the third reading of, yes, you guessed it, the blight area, impact area, which came to be the blight. It was on that, reading, it was about a zoning change.
Yeah.
It was about a zoning change, reportedly requested by the owners of the property and represented on behalf of 4G Enterprises by Brad Enzi, Laramie Chamber Business Alliance Executive Director.
Well, I guess the bottom line here about things being legal, including whether they should have renoticed things, that particular meeting. The final arbiter of whether something is legal or not, unfortunately, is the courts. And the courts are slow. It's expensive to go to court.
Who pays your legal attorney costs of representation to take it to the ultimate degree, to take it to court, to uphold your rights?
Well, that's the thing. The city obviously can use taxpayer money to do that and has a virtually infinite pocketbook when it comes to that. If a private citizen wants to challenge the city, well, they've got to pay for it out of their own pocket. And this is a problem.
And they
because
go
it
into
essentially
executive
means,
session.
yeah.
How many times have they gone into executive session where HR, human resource information and discussions, and legal advisement
that's the thing.
go into private closed-door meetings?
The city actually gets sued quite a lot for doing things which are questionably legal. Probably way too often. I think they really ought to, take a more careful look at the law. But the ultimate arbiter is the courts. But in practical terms, it doesn't. It's not practical to go to the courts for everything. And so the city should have a way of getting independent legal opinions. Now, the legal opinions which I voice at the meetings when I was telling them that no, the blight designation wasn't illegal, that what they did with stormwater wasn't legal, and all of that. I'd actually, these are my opinions. But don't trust me or any citizen to, or even any lawyer speaking at a meeting to necessarily be able to tell what a court is going to decide. Let's get more opinions and hopefully avoid going to court because, well, again, it's expensive to go to court and it costs taxpayer money. Let's find someone who doesn't have skin in the game to give us better legal opinions. I'd like to see that happen.
Brett, you mentioned 3 principles. Repeat those 3. There's 3 important keys, if you would.
Well, okay. The first one is very simple. City council should listen. If your council person is not listening to you, vote them out.
Does
There's
their
going to
vote
be an election.
represent?
Yeah.
Does their vote represent your vantage point?
Yeah. There's going to be an election this year, and there are going to be 5 seats on city council. We have 9 members on it. The majority of city council is going to be up. Is going to be up, and in fact, we're going to have a completely empty seat because Councilor Joe Shumway is retiring, and that seat is going to be completely up for grabs. There's not going to be an incumbent asking to be reelected to that seat. We should look at the behavior of our city council members and reelect only the ones that listen to the public, the ones that have ignored you, the ones that seem to be flouting the law, the ones that seem to be against having elections when we should be having elections on issues. Those are the ones who we should say thank you very much to, but we should retire them. Second thing, again, we should really get good opinions about what is legal without having to have people sue the city. We're constantly, as you mentioned, Eric, the city is constantly embroiled with lawsuits, mainly from people who believe the city has violated the law, and it may well have. It loses a lot of these lawsuits. And so we really should make sure that we get good advice from someone who doesn't have skin in the game about whether what the city is doing is legal, and we should take that advice when we're making final decisions, when council is making final decisions. And finally, as often as possible, we should bring issues to the voters. We shouldn't try to bypass having elections for things like the city borrowing money or the city imposing a whole new regime for stormwater drainage, especially when state law is very clear on those subjects. So again, we should be in favor of more democracy. Yes, we have a representative government. The Constitution of the United States says that our governments have to be representative. They have to be Republican. That's the word that the Constitution uses. But that doesn't mean that they should operate open loop, as a computer scientist would say, without input from the public. They need to actually be representing us, and we need to make sure they do.
Collectively, 2 voices supported a yes vote on the blight designation at this open house meeting by City Council March 26th. And I appreciate their perspective. I appreciate their right to give that vantage point. However, I would guesstimate at least 40, maybe 40 to 50 would be the range of people who were collectively in the room that were either remained silent or spoke against the blight designation. And some of the voices that we've not played their opinions, one stood out to me very passionate about the importance of solace, the importance of wildlife as a corridor where raccoon, various species, deer have they use that. Well, it follows a river.
Yeah.
It naturally is that. How can anyone not understand that person's perspective of peace, contemplation?
Yeah.
The value of that really doesn't get quantified.
Yeah.
But in a mental health era where mental health is such a high growing concern, that's important feedback. I thought it was really powerful.
Yeah, and people at the meeting talked about having the area near the river possibly being purchased by a nature conservancy, which would be wonderful.
Tom Matamore suggested from his perspective, perhaps group could unite. He's very complimentary to the West Side neighbors, the West Side Historic District area neighbors often unite and commonly come together and represent. His suggestion, try to buy it.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If we grant the blight designation, which again, there's all kinds of reasons not to, and very few people spoke in favor of it, it raises the selling price of the land and it makes it harder for a nature conservancy to buy it. So again, the blight designation would be working against the use that most members of the public recommended for that land.
I liked Mr. Matamore's. I liked his input because it at least was part of a conversation, and it was an important perspective to do. Mm-hmm. I texted the last known number that I had for current one half of the owners, at least, of 4G Enterprises, and I haven't heard back from them. I haven't heard any response. I could have the wrong number. It could be an old number, but I did effort to that end. One other resident neighbor inside the 300-foot impact area of the I-2 to R3 zoning change was an individual who attended a previous city function where Fred Schmeckel spoke, and it was represented by her account that plans were for a 52 resident facility or a specific number, and there were plans for that area, and they were quite specific. That was a representation that was much different than we heard at the open house meeting, or was claimed by City Council.
Well, again, state law says you're not supposed to plan anything for an urban renewal area until the council initiates the entire project by declaring the area to be blighted. And yet there was this open house where they were getting pretty specific, and this was one of the options that they presented for development. They didn't present it as a definite plan, but they sure did flesh it out. They spent a lot of time doing that, and the state law actually prohibits them from making such plans until there is a blight designation already in place. And again, the city paid for this planning, even though it benefits the landowners. The landowners really should have paid for this project. We paid thousands of dollars to consultants in Cheyenne who are making money planning these projects for all over the state. And again, it was a use of taxpayer money that was probably inappropriate and probably illegal.
if engineers are consulted to do studies on this area, is it engineers that would also be potential benefactors of the development itself? They could be, couldn't they?
Oh, I see what you're driving at. Yes, and that's absolutely true. It can be that they're motivated to render opinions which are biased because, well, that way they'll get the next job doing the same thing. This is another problem that we have with our city government in general, that we tend to hire consultants who want to get the recommendation for the next job and therefore will go along with whatever the staff seems to want. Because, well, then they'll get a good recommendation when someone goes and asks the staff who is a good consultant. I think we should hire fewer outside consultants for things in general because of this problem.
Did our last city manager exit the city of Laramie to a lesser paying job or a higher paying job?
I haven't researched how much she's being paid by the city of Casper, but I doubt it's less than what she is being paid here. Even though her salary was quite nice, she was paying, $219,000 a year? Plus
And
all kinds of perks.
I understand it's in the neighborhood of 240
There
in
you go.
Casper, Wyoming.
I would not be surprised. I haven't researched it, but that sounds like the right ballpark.
Now, so when you do that, now the mayor of New York City might make at or about $250,000
Mm-hmm.
in charge of a population center of 8.5 million.
Yes.
Now, obviously, mayor and city manager, those are different positions, but essentially in the form of government we have, they're more similar than dissimilar.
Yes. Well, when you have a strong mayor government as opposed to a weak mayor government, essentially your mayor
Elected
is
versus not.
Yeah, exactly. Then the mayor is the city manager. So yeah, the jobs are comparable. And you're right. It does seem the city manager salaries in Wyoming in general do seem a bit high.
So my point to go into that direction was to say, if you're building a resume, well, you've certainly grown government in Laramie, Wyoming, haven't we?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because, and this is you've made an astute observation on social media that the city of Casper is also considering forming an urban renewal authority, very much like the one down here in Laramie, and probably to undertake similar projects.
So when you take all of these things into account, the facts speak for themselves, folks. And if they don't speak to you, you have to ask, are you paying attention?
Yeah.
Are you not paying attention?
Yeah.
When asking questions, because we pay attention, reactions aren't always favorable to you or I, are they?
Well, we have a general
I
trend
have
here.
tough skin.
Yeah.
I can take it. But when you publicly speak from a elevated position in the room and philosophically, in that you are at a different place and you take advice from an elevated position versus the people, and you rulers treat peasants. We had a big No Kings 3 initiative, a movement on the lawn of the Albany County Courthouse. And it was attended by many of our city council, many of our citizens in Laramie.
Yeah. Well, we have a trend here which transcends political parties and transcends the different levels of government. Government at all levels is becoming less responsive to the people. It's becoming more autocratic. It's becoming more arbitrary. And it is, again, governments themselves are violating the law when they feel like doing so. This is a disturbing trend.
Wait a
Yeah?
minute. Stop right there.
Yeah?
We asked public for comment.
Yeah?
We surveyed the community. We held open forums. We paid consultants
Mm-hmm.
on this very topic and others like it.
Yeah. But then,
We
yeah.
have studied this.
But then
We have
where's the
analysis which
follow-through?
supports our opinion. We've had collegiate,
Yeah.
we have had collegiate, future career-oriented individuals come from Colorado and give the West Side neighborhood opportunity to give their input.
Yeah.
Although they only presented 9 choices for what your neighborhood might look like, not one of those 9 looked like or similar to what we saw out the window of 365 West Grand,
Yeah.
the Lincoln Community Center. There were 4 hours in the day, 4 hours in the night.
Yeah.
On the 21st of February, and then on the 1st of April, 2 separate dates. They even brought ice cream. They brought root beer floats.
Yeah, but where's the point is, where is the follow through, or is this just a charade?
Who summarizes the data, Mr. Glass?
That's the point. The people who summarize the data influence the outcome, and again, these are the people who have a specific vested interest in the outcome.
And what do we know about statistics, Mr. Glass?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well,
That question.
can statistics be presented one way or 360 degrees in opportunity? Can they be presented the exact same data? Can it be presented in 2 different fashions?
Oh, sure. I mean, you can.
How could that possibly be? Certainly, statistics would point us in the right direction, true north, if you will. Every compass has its magnetism to north.
Yeah, there we go. Unfortunately, you know, as Mark Twain famously said, there are lies, damnable lies, and statistics.
This is not funny, folks. This is truly America. And in our 250th year of America, this is what we have come to. Listen to the people. Listen to your friends. Listen to your neighbors. Don't claim unseen email as support for your vote and not present the email. Don't come to a city council meeting and claim, many people have told me otherwise, but yet those people are never seen. Did they care? Did their care rise to the level of coming to the podium and being gavelled at 3 minutes? Or told 5 seconds in, stick to the point?
Yeah. Well,
Interrupted 3 and 4 times inside 3 minutes? What happens to that time? Is it extended? No, it's not extended. You don't get more than 3 minutes unless you're a paid representative of one alliance or another.
yeah.
And that influence might even give you 6 more minutes to
Yeah.
rebut after your 3 minutes. The inconsistencies are glaring, folks. Pay attention. And if you want to review what I'm talking about, I can take you to the YouTube account. I've recorded them audio just in case something happens and they disappear. I don't trust a lot of what's going on, and this is the action that I take as a citizen and as a prep for this show, The Talk Shop, on 93.5 FM. As I've said before, the opinions expressed here are those of Brett Glass and myself, Eric Henderson. Neither of us are attorneys, but we can read the statutes, read the ordinances that are presented as foundations for the principles that are supposed to guide our community. Forever forward, Brett Glass and myself, Eric Henderson. Any closing comment, Mr. Glass?
Well, again, my final comment is that there's an election coming up this fall, and we have an opportunity, at least on the local level. You know, we can to replace more than half of our city council. We're going to have an election in May where we have an opportunity to vote on the special purpose excise tax.
Ballots will be available they will be available April 20th. And that will allow absentee and early voting through May 5th, 2026 on the ballot initiative, the specific purpose sales and use excise tax ballot in Albany County, Wyoming.
Yes, and we also will have a primary election in August where we're going to have a very crowded, very crowded ballot with lots of potential candidates for the.
There's like
for the
7
partisan
gubernatorial
offices.
candidates.
Yeah.
I think maybe one Democratic candidate thus
Yeah.
far. you know, we're gonna forge forward on the Candidate Awareness Tour 2026. Every candidate has an opportunity to come to the microphone, answer your questions, mine, the talk shops, the community of Laramie at large, perhaps Wyoming's. We've had visits from the Freedom Caucus. We've had visits from the Wyoming Democratic Party. We've had comments come from the Albany County Republican Party. We've had representatives who are running on the Constitution Party ballot. We have as much as will participate, we accommodate right here on the Talk Shop. And you only have to get a hold of RadioWorks at mail.com. Walk in our door, 255, Studio 255 at the Laramie Plains Civic Center. Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. daily, and by appointment, 307-760-3642. That's the Talk Shop text line, presented this hour by Chano's Village, 513 Boswell Drive in Laramie. That's it, folks. Have a great day. Be safe out there.